is Jordan Watts, and I'm going to be going over the book summary. So, in the book Lakota Woman, Mary Crow Dog recounts her view of the subjection of her people and women within her tribe, and she becomes a traditional woman of her tribe that is steeped in the ancient beliefs of her people and reconciles with her history. This book discusses how poverty, alcoholism, and crime on reservations are inevitable results of government regulations, and how the government has oppressed and dehumanized Native Americans and are forcing them to assimilate. So Mary Crow Dog is from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, and she is a daughter of a white father who abandoned her family. She experiences a lot of racism and discrimination as a child, but she retaliates against a priest and leaves her boarding school with a diploma. After she leaves the school, she falls into drinking and drugs and stealing when she gets back home. Shortly after this, she attends the first American Indian movement in 1971. One of the speakers at the American Indian movement in 1971 is her future husband, Leonard Crow Dog. Her connection with AIM soon inspires her to learn a lot more about her roots, and so she begins attending different ceremonies to feel more of a belonging and unity to her roots. She becomes pregnant, but then later joins AIM in Washington, D.C. for the Trail of Broken Treaties. She protests at Wounded Knee, which becomes occupied for 71 days. Her husband, Leonard Crow Dog, revives the ghost dance, which had not been performed since Wounded Knee in 1980. Mary Crow Dog delivers her baby boy, Pedro, and a while after that, the negotiations end in the Wounded Knee siege. Mary Crow Dog and Leonard Crow Dog get married and move to Crow Dog's compound, which is called Crow Dog's Paradise. And here, Mary learns a lot more about the traditions and the customs of her tribe. Leonard Crow Dog gets arrested after a violent incident, and then he is subjected to torture and discrimination in prison. And about after 2 years, he gets released. Leonard Crow Dog goes on basically a quest to gain peace and clarity because he is very secluded from the outside world in prison. And then towards the end of the book, Mary Crow Dog finally feels wholly Indian after a sacred sun dance. So that's my take on a simple summary of the book. So for my social issue, I am going to be relating a current event to assimilation, and assimilation is clearly a really big theme addressed throughout the whole novel. So although many Americans don't really realize it, the industrialization of Indian reservations is a form of assimilation, and the roads, satellite dishes, amongst other things, are reaching the isolated lands of Indian communities, and like I said, this can be a form of assimilation. An elder was actually interviewed by a Northern Arizona university and said that TV is robbing the children of their language, of their native language. The children of all these different tribes are learning English and mainstream culture through media, and while they're learning all of these things, they're at the same time losing the culture and tradition and language of their tribes, of their native people. If this isn't changed or addressed somehow, most of the remaining Native American languages will be extinct in another year or two. So that's my current social issue that relates to the book.
My name is Angelina Llanes, and in my section of Lakota Woman, I talk about the different adversities that she dealt with because she was a female and because she was of a lower class. I relate her stories to the stories or the articles of Chavez and the articles throughout Ferguson, because in these articles, Chavez talks about how because he was a lower class, he dealt with a lot. He wasn't able to have a childhood, really, and I think the same of this woman in Lakota Woman. And also in Ferguson, they talk a lot about the relationships and the differences that males and females have in the society, the different roles they play in the job world, in the meaning of relationship and what their roles truly are. And I think that this is really important and stands out. There's a big gender role gap in Lakota Woman because she talks, especially in the Indian tribe, she talks about how she isn't able to be a warrior like these boys are. She isn't able to speak up as they are. The only time she really speaks up is when her husband is in jail and she has to go into the courts and talk. But other than that, she is seen as needing to be protected by the men rather than her being able to protect her people as well. And she talks about the just adversity she deals with being female and being poor.
My name is Matthew Galvis, and for the book we read, Lakota Woman, I was tasked with speaking about the correlation between our class IDS 3013 and the book Lakota Woman. And I was told to dig deep on the topic and the theme in this novel, which is racism. This theme was very heavy as we experienced the life of Mary Crow Dog, who was part of the Indian tribe in South Dakota, and how her people were forced to assimilate and become American citizens. And they were treated differently. They were laughed at. She was bullied. She was treated differently because she wasn't typically white. She was Native American, brown skin, not different traditions, different clothing, different hairstyles, very different. And she was treated differently and bullied because of that, which is funny because Native Americans were the first ones here. So Americans have no right to be pushing these people out or forcing them to become part of their society, when in reality the Native Americans were there first, so they should have the freedom to be their own people. Which is bringing us to the readings we read from Ferguson, as the first beginning chapters spoke about nationality and ethnicity and the definitions. And many people felt that the ethnicity Native Americans was very different to nationality, saying that they're Native Americans or natives or Indians, making them not a part of the U.S., making them not Americans. But in reality, they were here first. So the nationalities are American, whether you like it or not. So that's something that I feel like I wrote about in one of my reading reflections, that you have to understand the difference between these things. You have to know the difference between nationality and ethnicity in order to help move on for these problems. And another reading was identity. Many people usually have their own identity, see themselves a different way, but the identity that they're given, as told us by Ferguson in the chapters, was society usually labels an identity to you. And in this situation in the book, Mary Crow Dog was labeled as an Indian. She was an Indian. She was not American. She was a native. That's how she was treated. That's how her identity was labeled by the other people. And then I also had to relate it to a current issue, social issue, and that was the Black Lives Matter movement. That's what I related it to. And that's why I put the MLK I Have a Dream speech that we read in the beginning of the semester, because I feel like it's very important and key to what's going on right now. With all police brutality and all the racist acts and the hate crimes that we've been seeing in social media recently, has shown that America has a big problem right now with racism. And MLK I Have a Dream is still a speech and something that we should all read and endure and learn from, because after 50 years, the problem is still here and nothing has changed. Thank you very much.
Throughout the book, there are certain inequalities that seem to keep popping up again and again. One of these is a religious inequality that not just the Lakota, but the vast majority of Native Americans must suffer. From the moment the white government began to instill its influence in the land until very recently, they were forced to either not commit rituals that they find religious and holy, or to completely turn away from their native beliefs. In page 92 of Lakota Woman, it reads, "You should know that the movement for Indian rights was first of all a spiritual movement, that our ancient religion was at the heart of it. Up to the time of Franklin D. Roosevelt, Indian religion was forbidden." On the same page, it goes on to say that Christianizing us was the one way of making us white, that is, of making us forget that we were Indians. The fact of the matter is that to a people whose property and even native children have been, as a matter of protocol, stolen from them and systematically Americanized, the native religious traditions that they've been trying so desperately to keep alive is one of the last vestiges they have of their culture and, relatedly, their race. This inequality of religious freedom was purposefully done in order to strip Native Americans of their identity and their history so that they could never rally around a shared identity or community and pose any kind of threat. In addition, it is made apparent from the beginning of the book until the end that there is a huge disparity of wealth between those on the reservation and those off of it. On page 18 it states that we had no electricity, no heating system, no plumbing, We got our water from the river. Some of the things which even poor white or black ghetto people take for granted, we did not even know existed. We knew little about the world outside, having no radio or TV. Maybe that was a blessing. As the reader can see, social inequalities have been rampant and systematic in the American government's efforts to dispossess and disable Native American groups.
The novel Lakota Woman provides an insight into the lives and injustices of minorities. For example, we see how Mary Crawdog and her family endure social injustices as natives in the 19th century. We see that at the beginning of the novel, social injustice is the primary topic of the novel. So Crawdog was born from a native mother and a white father. As a result, she felt like she didn't belong to either races because she was teased by both races, which made her feel unacceptable. Over the novel, we see that throughout the years, she comprehends how her race will determine her fate and how it will affect every aspect of her life. Around the age of 14 and 15, for example, Crawdog is raped and decides to keep it a secret because Native girls are most of the time not believed. And whenever a Native girl claims to be raped, it is rarely investigated. On the other hand, white young ladies that are raped, their accusations are taken seriously and they're never questioned. Throughout the novel, we see various examples of social inequality. But in today's society, we have also seen unfair killings of minorities that can relate to the novel. For example, the murder case of 32-year-old Philando Castillo, who was fatally shot by a police officer during a traffic stop after Castillo informed him that he was armed and that he was going to reach for his license and not his firearm. Today, social inequality and social injustices is prevalent.